There's a lot of liquid coming out of an ant, as far as I can see. Where does it all come from? How do they get more liquid? How do they, stock up? They're pretty small.
It's a good question.
And 3D's digging dirt towards
Maybe
them.
halfway through, Digger could actually morph into Pac-Man and just show how Digger and Pac-Man were basically exactly the same game.
I think the Smurfs need to be done, but with machine guns.
I want someone to
Gargamel,
make
they need to ruin
a
Gargamel.
Smurfs movie where they explain how there are so many Smurfs and only one Smurfette.
I think she's older than she looks. She's the mother of Smurf kind.
Very good. Yeah, recap.
Get it going.
This is amazing. It's so good that we haven't spoken for a long time. That means everything we say is going to be with fresh ears. We're going to be reacting genuinely.
Well, making the assumption that we don't pay any attention to each other's Facebooks, Instagrams,
Or the news.
or the news, then everything is going to be totally fresh. Have you heard about this whole COVID-19 thing? Is that
I just got off the phone with my cousin, and shocking, like my cousin-in-law has just been diagnosed with cancer.
Oh.
And meanwhile, his brother, my other cousin, is about to have a baby, probably in the next week or so.
There you go.
And his sister's just travelled from Vanuatu to live with their mum. To go in isolation. There's so much happening. Every bit of news seems to be lost in this giant stream.
Yeah.
Bushfires have gone away instantly, right? That was a big deal.
It
Now
is.
it's like, who's even talking about that? Nobody.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. I mean, my sister actually just had surgery today for cancer that she found out about last week, or just a week ago. So she's just come out of surgery this morning or this afternoon, Australia time, I think. So apparently she's doing all right.
Wow.
But yeah, so it's quite amazing to do that. Actually, it's an amazing scenario that I think this year, because I found out my auntie also had a type of cancer this year, and then my sister. But like they say, like in the medical profession, they say 1 in 4 people will get cancer, right? This is the number. And I turned 40 in January, and this is the first time that I remember from a direct family member that I've heard about like cancer being part of my family. Like my grandparents didn't pass away from cancer. Like 2 of them are still alive in their 90s. So it's like this had never been something that had directly affected me. But now I'm realizing that at some point in time, it will eventually affect you, right? Just statistics, weighted numbers, it'll always get there.
I've thought about medicine and medical stuff at certain times of my life. But I think this is the time now that the world's just been absolutely shut down. Like it's 1918 Spanish flu, which incidentally had a 50% or something like that death rate, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, no, not really.
High. 10%? It was high.
Yeah, I mean the difference when it comes to death rates an interesting one. So you have to base the medical system, right? They didn't have CT, they didn't have MR, they didn't have ultrasound. They had some version of X-ray that was not very
Can you just tell our audience what you do exactly?
So I work. I'm a radiographer as a profession originally. So I did my university degree in radiography and medical imaging. And now I'm working as the head of marketing for the software group for Siemens Healthineers. So
Siemens are the manufacturer of a lot of those
Siemens
devices.
Exactly. And so they also manufacture a bunch of software to be used to read all of those images around the world and to do it in a highly efficient way. And that's the group that I'm heading the marketing of, which is good. It's a bit of fun. But I mean, it's an interesting one. So I was working in a hospital for 10 years and then working in the medical field for 20 in total. And okay, there are things that specialists know and stuff that you sit there and go, I don't know how these people know all of this stuff. So there's definitely people way smarter than I am in this area. But no, it's amazing that if you look at death rates of basic diseases and you do a sort of a sum. So to do a calculation of the Spanish flu versus regular death rate, you have to look at if someone went to hospital back in 1800s, would they have a very high chance of dying, yes or no? Because nowadays, someone goes to hospital and their chances of dying are quite low. We cure people of things that
Was golden staph a thing in those days?
well, all of them were probably there. They might not have even known that they were there. People were dying at the age of 40, and no one really knew what was causing it in a lot of cases, right? So,
Can you just clear up something minor? Just a
Yeah.
little small point. Everyone talks about the average age of a person's life in the year 1900 to be about 42 or something, right?
something like that, yeah.
That's brought massively down by stillbirths or whatever, right? Children, babies, women who die during childbirth and babies who die during childbirth. If we take that away, people are still living till 90 at the turn of this last century, weren't they?
Well, to live till 90 was considered to be a very, very long age, right? Nowadays, if your grandparents die before 70, you're shocked and stunned, right?
Yeah.
Yes, it's brought down. Actually, it would be rather interesting whether or not they used stillbirths and stuff as a measurement of life expectancy. That's actually a really interesting question.
Well, if you're talking about average, you can't dismiss it.
Well, yeah, you can, because you can always dismiss outliers. I mean, you could sort of say, well, let's only start counting from the age of 10 or the age of...
Okay.
You could take a group and say, if you become an adult, how long would you live for? And give a rough adult life expectancy, knowing that children who pass away before the age of 10 are not the majority. But if everyone was dying before the age of 10 and only one person became an adult, then you have to include the young. So yeah, I think weighted statistics is fine. You can do that way. Okay. I just think that you basically, at the moment, people are comparing things over generations or over even centuries, and trying to say, well, the Black Death or the plague or the Spanish flu, these had massively high death rates. And go, well, they did, but they didn't have treatment processes. They didn't have respirators. They didn't have the drugs that we have now. I mean, there's a bunch of reasons why people are surviving through this now.
When you say respirator, I was triggered to think of, is it ventilator? Is that the thing that ICUs need to keep somebody with COVID-19 alive? Is that a suction thing in the lungs? What is that thing?
No. So there's, and this was actually a conversation I had last night. So it's a little bit of a weird one. You can have one that is actually doing the breathing for a person, and something that is doing providing oxygen to a person. So a ventilator versus a respirator. A ventilator will just provide the oxygen into someone, and then a respirator will breathe for them.
We're assuming both of these people are conscious or not?
Most often, but sometimes not. I mean, but and if people are watching this, if we do post this, don't quote me on but there is the definite distinguishment between the two, where you can also transfer the oxygen and the carbon dioxide and have, because you've got to get the carbon dioxide out of the system and in, and if someone's breathing is so shallow or the lungs are unable to really be doing this transfer, then people can get a hypoxic and die from that, not from the COVID-19 itself. And that's actually the thing here, is that people...
What's that mean? Hypoxic?
So too much oxygen in the system, or too little. So you can have basically too much of a good thing in this situation. But yeah, I mean, it's always always an interesting one for me.
Well, oxygen is basically a poisonous gas, isn't it? We've just evolved to breathe it. I mean, it causes rust. It causes what's called free radicals in our body that eventually rip our DNA to shreds at the ends and stuff. Isn't that what's going on when we age? Basically, the oxygen molecules are ripping away at our DNA and helping them not get copied nicely enough.
I mean, we need oxygen to survive, so I don't think it matters in that situation, really. But
trees don't want it, though. It's like a discharge from a tree.
Yeah, but then they want our discharge. So if we kept carbon dioxide in our system, we would also
Where did they get it from before we were here to give them all our pollution? And cows.
Well, it's a really good question as to where trees. Trees are basically taking carbon dioxide and emitting oxygen, right? This is their methodology, and carbon dioxide existed higher in the atmosphere at certain times in history because of volcanic action and stuff like this. The planet wasn't as stable as it was when human life began, right? But I mean, we went from being underwater dwellers to out of water dwellers, right? So we were getting our oxygen from water.
But even fish take in oxygen, right? They don't take in carbon dioxide.
No, they take in oxygen. A lot of most of them, not all of them. There are some other creatures that take in nitrogen. There are other creatures that take in other elements. There's a really good series on YouTube called Eons. I don't know whether you've ever watched it, but it's quite a clever YouTube channel that sort of looks into the development of different animals and how they developed from one type to another type, and what they can tell from genetics as to where things must have happened. Actually, they had a really interesting one on COVID-19, or on viruses in general. It wasn't specifically on COVID-19, on viruses in general, and how you can tell where a virus has come from and who's had it over history. And the fact that viruses actually change genetic markers, so that if you then have children and they have children and whatever, in a few centuries, people will be able to tell which virus existed hundreds of years ago based on someone's genetics, and where like different animals have had the same thing. It's quite interesting.
That's amazing. But they haven't determined yet whether it came from a bat through a snake or some other thing, right? At the moment?
No, not specifically. I mean, they at the moment the assumption is it's come from some additional produce that wasn't a normal thing that we would be eating, but
from a wet market in Wuhan.
Yeah, well, that apparently is not 100% true. I think that was that may. I've at least read in places that might have been fake news, and people were just trying to say that it was people eating bats or whatever. It may not have been actually related to that. So,
well, I've heard a theory that it's biological warfare, but it's not very good aim. It's like throwing a grenade in the air and just waiting for it to land somewhere.
Look, see, conspiracy theories are an amazing thing, right? You go, okay, which country did it start in? I mean, I don't believe this, by the way. So this is totally, I do not in any way, shape or form believe that China decided to unleash a global pandemic, and they sort of knew where that they were going to start it. They knew how to shut down the rest of the country. They had already prepared. I mean, this is what everyone's trying to say, and that they knew that the country least likely, because of the current political leader, the country least likely to actually deal with it was the country that had the strongest economy, and it would enable a market shift towards the country that overcame it first, which is the country that apparently it started in, right? So I've got all of the dots. If you put all of it together, you go, wow, if someone was as brilliant to come up with that idea to get there, I mean, good on them, man. There's a bunch of things that would have had to have taken place, including...
You can reverse engineer some things in wacky ways.
Including being willing to kill off many
And
people.
you wouldn't cast the experiment in Wuhan either. That's not like a major industrial province, isn't it?
Yeah.
Isn't that where they make all the electronics and stuff?
Oh, well, no, but that's the perfect place to start it, right? Wuhan, I do not believe it at all.
No, I understand, but going with that theory.
You're going with that theory, you take your largest industrial center that's going to have the biggest effect on the most companies, international companies, right? You get that factory to pre-stockpile, that city to pre-stockpile all of their equipment, all of their stuff, so that they can sell after the crisis when everyone else has dropped down. All of the stock markets drop dramatically because the prices all go down. China buys into those stocks at a lower price, and then all of a sudden all of these factories are able to run at 100%, actually higher than 100%, to rebuild all the stocks back up, and they've made absolute fortunes.
And all it cost was a couple of 100 million people or something.
All it cost in a country with 1 billion people, a couple of 100 million. Okay.
I was actually thinking about this. You know, apparently the difference between
Again,
India's...
I do not believe that at all. Not at all.
We'll edit that disclaimer out. So apparently the difference in population between China and India is... So I think India is about 1.322, like so 1,322,000,000 people, and China's like 1,382,000,000. So if you look at the amount of people who've died in China from coronavirus, or even people who've contracted it, less than 100,000, that is actually 4 decimal places after we stopped counting the decimal places. Like if you're going 1.386, well, it's 1.382 billion in China. You'd need to go 3.82 something 1 to get to the 100,000 or something like that. It's just massive population.
Yeah, it's massive. I mean, the really interesting thing is, like, if you look at India and what they've done, so India's basically turned around, and for 3 weeks they're shutting the whole country down. Just 1.3 billion people, bang.
25% homeless in India?
Yeah. I don't know the number there, but it's a very high number, right?
I just spoke to somebody and they said they're whacking them with sticks to clear off.
They've just shut down. They've just shut down the entire country, which is the exact reaction that every other country should have done. But imagine that every other country is going, but that's going to ruin our economy and it's going to ruin everything. And then there's a country with 1.3 billion people who go, oh, well, we don't want people to die. So let's shut it down now. And Australia's turning around going, well, we'll shut some things down, but we'll leave the schools open for a little bit. And I mean, and look, at the end of the day, I mean, you and I have talked about this numerous times over the years. There are some things that the majority of population just will not be able to work out for themselves, and governments need to be able to provide them that support. And then there are other people who should be able to work it out. And unfortunately, in this crisis, the left of the bell curve of people who can work things out need governments to be hard with them, because we had this in Germany. The government highly recommended working from home. So it was a recommendation. They highly recommended not getting out into communities. They highly recommended staying in your home as often as possible. They sort of limited the number of shops and stuff and said that, like, we recommend only doing this and this. One half of the people freaked out, started buying all the toilet paper and started freaking out and buying everything, every pasta on the shelf.
That's happened in Australia, and that happened in Germany too.
Happens around, so it happens.
I'm in Melbourne, Australia. Where are you at the moment?
In Germany. Yeah, so
Which city?
In Nuremberg, sort of north of Munich for those playing at home.
München.
North of München. That's another topic of conversation about why do English-speaking countries name things different, but that's another one. No, it's a rather interesting thing. The government tried to do the thing where they dealt with the whole bell curve, right? They gave information to the whole bell curve saying there is a problem, we highly recommend to do this. And most people heeded the right-hand side of the bell curve, heeded the warning, and the left-hand side of the bell curve were like, we're going to throw a party, we're going to do this, we're going to travel from this city to that city and hang out with our friends. Like, people were doing a whole bunch of stuff, and the government really should have said, okay, no, we're going to deal with the lowest point and make everyone deal with that point. Now, that's what India's approach was, saying if 10% of you don't pay attention to this, we lose 100 million people, right? So their bell curve is not necessarily shifted left or right, but there's more people in it. Australia's got 25 million, 26 million or whatever. So if 10% of the people don't pay attention, then you've only got 2.5 million at risk, right?
What's Germany, 86 million?
And then Germany's like 80 something, yeah. And so again, they're looking at massive numbers of people who could cause issues, and then obviously Italy being so close, and the spread through Italy to Austria and to Switzerland out was clear. There's a clear thing. So Germany turning around going, shut down, makes complete sense. I mean,
what is your shutdown? Can you describe it?
So we've been on lockdown for a week and a bit. So just over a week and a half. The lockdown basically is you're not allowed to go and hang out in public with any more than 2 people. So 2 people total.
That starts here for midnight.
You're allowed to go out for a run or a bike ride or having a kick to kick with two people. Like you could do that, but you're not allowed to socialize, and you should remain at a social distance of this 2 meters that people are talking about, 1.5, 2 meters. They've left supermarkets are open and stocking the shelves constantly, so there's no need to go and buy up big because supermarkets are functioning normally.
That's
but when
good.
you go to a supermarket, there are now security people making sure people are staying the right distance away from each other. Obviously, no one cares about the security guy, but apparently we need that.
Does he have a mask on? The
No,
workers
no, that's so weird. It's so weird that anyway. But I guess at the end of the day, it comes more from other aspects, touch and that side.
Spittle. Breathing.
You are allowed, so you have to be locked down, but they do know that some people can't work from home and they want to maintain working. So if an employer can't provide someone with the capability of working from home, they have to set up the offices that people would be completely socially isolated within an office. And they otherwise have to then organize holidays or overtime hours to be paid out and all that sort of stuff. So it's okay. I mean, it just basically, it's basically just it's not so strict that you're not allowed to walk outside. So this morning I was able to go to the shops, grab a bunch of stuff to be able to cook for the rest of the day. I've got a bit extra food in the house than I normally would because actually the shops in Germany are much closer. You can just sort of quickly walk, grab something. So I normally buy to eat. I don't normally
Don't you worry about every handle and banister and door handle and shelf and food? Do you wash your hands? Do you carry alcohol gel and stuff?
No, I don't. I mean, I wash my hands before I eat. I wash my hands before touching stuff generally, but I was doing that beforehand because actually the whole idea of washing your hands after going to the toilet is something you're meant to be doing.
I do that, but now I walk around like I've just gone to the toilet. The moment I walk outside the house, after I just touch the bloody button to open the security gate. How many? There are only 9 units here, but fuck, that's now coronary finger now. I've got the gel in the pocket. I rub my hands around with the gel. I wash the gel packaging, right, and put it back in my pocket.
Okay,
everything.
But just
the
imagine,
Bowser,
just imagine it in this way, though, right? Because there's a bit of a science behind that as well. We know that this virus is mutated from the original version to the version that's here now, and may have mutated in the meantime. So
last month.
Yeah. So it was quite a highly adaptive virus. This is one reason why it's surviving so long, generally, right? That's basically this idea. If you go out and wash your hands every time, and imagine every surface you touch has corona, and you go and wash your hands every time. And imagine the virus manages to adapt itself to deal with your hand sanitizer, which you're constantly
it's got a fatty layer on the outside shell of it, and so you're ripping that away, and the RNA strand inside is.
This is what they're saying, right? But imagine it can adapt itself. That's just more the question. So
strengthening its core, like its shell.
And then it turns around and goes, well, actually now I can deal with that. And then you touch the next object, and the next person has a super version of the virus that is immune to hand sanitizer, which
I don't know.
I mean, this is the thing. Overuse of hand sanitizer. We always learnt in the hospital not to overuse the hand sanitizer because you end up helping to create superbugs by making. Well, this multiple resistance that multiple resistance viruses and bacteria, because they're in environments of high higher amounts of antibiotics, or they're in higher amounts of
but if you've got an army of humans running, and whatever creatures we're crawling on is just smothering themselves in lava, right? Whatever the fuck is the equivalent to a living being of our size or whatever. I just don't think that if we suddenly grew like wings or something, if we got splashed with some lava, we'd still burn up and fucking die, right? how is alcohol not going to kill something that small? It's
Okay,
just something that would
use your
dry it out
example.
and
Use your example that you
the
just had,
lava, yeah,
and
the
use
lava on a human.
humans. Use humans as the virus.
Yeah.
I know you like doing that anyway. Then what have we done to overcome things that would kill us? We've done plenty of things to overcome things that would kill us. We used to starve, and we learned how to
Eat.
farm and to eat. Right?
No,
So
yeah, well, yeah, we don't have to forage as much as we used to.
we didn't have to forage as much. We centralized our food sources. We went through a whole bunch of elements to the point that we now have food in paper bags and refrigerators to keep things cold.
Love fridges.
That we're able to survive for a lot longer, right? So
yeah,
I mean, this is the most important.
But alcohol sounds pretty hardcore, though, doesn't it? To a tiny little bug. Is it a bug? What is a virus alive? I heard viruses weren't alive, but bacteria are alive. What's the deal with the aliveness of a virus? Is that something?
I recommend everyone to watch this Eons thing on YouTube. It talks about it.
What did it say about the definition of what is alive and what isn't alive? Is a virus considered to be alive?
So this was their thingo. There were now I would have to remember it off the top of my head. It's definitely talked about it. It sounds like you're going to the bathroom, mate. It was like,
I'm just pouring another bourbon.
It's a bit fizzy.
yeah, fizzy piss. First sign of coronavirus.
Yeah, exactly. Last sign of
adapted
life.
version.
Last sign of life.
It can survive in very acidic Coca-Cola style conditions.
No, it goes into it. It talks about that there are, I think it said 3 or 4 requirements to determine life, and viruses have 2 of the 4.
Okay.
The other ones are grey areas. But yeah, generally the answer is no. They're not alive, but they are adaptive and can. I mean, the fact that, think about it, coronavirus is a type of virus
Parasite?
Family. No, it's a virus family. So it's just a virus is basically a protein based what's the best way to say it? A protein based entity virus.
Yeah.
That attaches and can replicate itself based on a creature's own DNA and continue to break down, replicate. And as it breaks down, it breaks down the DNA of
the cells it's attacking. You've frozen. Oh, you froze.
No,
that's right.
All frozen, man. Yeah. Anyway, that's enough of me sounding like an expert in something that I'm not specifically an expert in.
One more question you might have the answer to: RNA versus DNA. I've heard that coronavirus called corona because corona is what, Spanish or Latin for crown, and it's got spikes sticking out of it all over the place, so it kind of looks like a crown. That's why that type of virus is called corona, right? And so the SARS, what's SARS stand for?
Sudden acquired respiratory syndrome.
I think you're confusing SIDS with SARS.
That was sudden.
No, sudden.
No.
I think sudden is for SIDS. Something acquired respiratory syndrome.
Yeah. I thought it was sudden. I thought it was sudden, but that could be...
Swine flu was SARS, right? The one from 2013 or something?
Yeah.
And that was a type of coronavirus as well? Is that correct?
Yeah.
From your recollection.
Because
this is called COVID SARS-2, this one we've got now, right?
Sudden, severe acute respiratory syndrome. There you go.
And what is
thank you, Google.
Okay. And so corona is simply a definition of the virus by its shape, but inside there's a coil of RNA. And from my understanding, that double helix, which is a twist of the ladder that we see in images of what DNA looks like, are 2 RNA half ladders stuck together. So I've always been confused about RNA, but it's almost like RNA is a single line of single helix Is that? Do you know if that's true?
Going too far into
Okay.
something I don't know.
Anyway,
enough
the image
about.
I saw, you've got a shell which has got spikes sticking out of it, probably for the purposes of latching onto something like Velcro, like digging into a cell. And then once it detects it with its tendrily fucking spikes, it breaks open. Its RNA comes out and starts merging and mutating your cells for the purpose of replicating itself.
Yeah.
And then your immune system tries to attack it, and sometimes your immune system becomes too strong and starts attacking your own body, killing off good cells as well. And sometimes people die from that. Or is that creating pneumonia, right. Too much phlegm in the lungs, and you'd start drowning in your own mucus or something?
So it breaks down cells, and as you break down certain cells, that means that they can't function the way they're meant to function. And if you break down a cell in the lung, then you basically could have what's meant to handle a fluid transfer no longer handles a fluid transfer, or it could be that it overactivates the fluid portion of the lung, and that's also there. I mean, but pneumonia works in a very similar way. So there are other diseases that also break down the lung in the same way. All that, and this is why they say this severe acute respiratory syndrome. Well, the respiratory syndrome part of it exists already. That's not just the virus basis thing, but it's the fact of how it comes on is one of the things. I mean, respiratory disease and respiratory syndromes are things that are some of the biggest killers in hospital. Not a lot of, I mean, I'm going to say it this way, and it's not meant to sound crass, but not a lot of people who have cancer die of cancer. They normally die of the effect that happens because of the cancer, if that makes sense. So either the brain or the heart or the lungs or the organs that are meant to function a certain way can't function the way they're meant to, and that's the bit that causes the body to no longer function. It's very rare that the cancer itself is the cause of death generally, right? I mean, we basically need our brain and our heart to function. If the kidneys, the liver, the spleen all stop functioning properly, then the heart and the brain don't function properly. So if you don't get enough nutrients to the heart, then the heart all of a sudden stops functioning. The nutrients come from whatever the liver and kidneys and everything else is doing and what the lungs are doing. So
I'm taking more of an interest in medicine right now than I ever have before. Seriously.
Yeah, it's a rather interesting point in time in that regard. But actually, the funny thing that I had was on that paying attention more. It's this whole idea that people are starting to pay more attention to how useful teachers are. I heard there was a celebrity the other day on like a YouTube channel, it's sort of turning around and going, God, why are we not paying these people millions of dollars a year? Like, why is it?
I'm always baffled at how much they know and how much homework they've got. They give us homework, like, I don't want to do that homework. And they've got so much more than us. I don't understand. And every question, like, even, see how I'm pounding you with questions, right? Like, imagine you have to do that, deal with students all the time. Well, if you're a lazy teacher, you could go, it's to do with something such and such, right? It could even be a wrong answer.
Okay, but hang on a sec. So you're in this one-on-one conversation, maybe learning, maybe not. Maybe I'm giving information that's 100% correct or 99 or...
Wouldn't that be the same as a teacher, though?
Well, no. So the whole point of a teacher is not to know the answer. The point of a teacher is to teach you how to learn the answer, how to find the answer.
You don't know.
Well,
Google it.
No, but that's actually that's part of the thing. If a teacher doesn't know the answer, that in itself is a learning point in time for a child. That, hey, for me to get every answer in the world, there won't be one form of person who's going to give me every answer. How would I find the answer? So if the teacher says, I do not know the answer to that question, what's the next step? Now, most students, I believe, and the problem with our teaching system is most students will go, oh, well, then I don't need to know that answer. I asked a question, I didn't get an answer, the teacher didn't know it, so therefore why do I need to know it? And that's the wrong element. And I would have been, and I'm sure you would have been as a student, the type of child who go, well, why don't they know the answer, and how do I find out the answer? How do
An
I?
annoying student.
Well, that
But
you
the
say
thing is-
annoying,
no, but
but
the
actually,
curiosity is a sign of intelligence.
I think teachers would be more than happy for you to turn around and go, but I want to know it still. Help me find the answer. And whether that's
well, how does this maths apply in real life?
whether that's the teacher going, yeah, well, it's so funny. So I never asked that question, mainly because my mum's a maths teacher and I had a pretty good understanding of how maths was going to help in real life. And right now is a really interesting situation. This whole flattening the curve thing that everyone's talking about, this whole staying at home, and how does that have an effect on the whole disease and the whole process, is real life mathematics taking place. It's real life understanding of exponential equations, which some students never learn at school, and others go into it in great detail. And this is a moment in time where the question, why do I ever need to know this? This is the example of why people need to know this, why at least half the population need to know this, because otherwise we would lose half the population, or a very large portion of the population. And so right now, if any teacher ever gets asked the question, why do I need to know algebra? This is why you need to know algebra, because we're applying every element to it. And I don't know whether you watched The Last Leg or watch much YouTube videos. The Last Leg, they did this thing using a chessboard to explain the difference between normal flu and coronavirus or COVID-19. And they used each section of a chessboard, and you don't need to use a chessboard necessarily. It's just like, people are like going, yeah, this is just like just like the flu. The flu also kills a lot of people, right? And the thing is that the flu kills 0.01%.
01 or 0.1?
I think it's 0.01 is the
Really?
mortality rate, and I think the mortality rate of COVID-19, it's different in every country, but it's something between 1 and 4%, right? But that's 1 and 4% of people that know that they have it, and this is always difficult. But you go basically and say, forget about the mortality rate and just look at the infection rate, and they say that influenza.
So can I just be clear about that 0.01 to 1 discrepancy? So 0.01 times 10 is 0.1.
Yeah.
Times 10 again, so it's 100 times more severe.
Yeah.
To get to 1%.
Yes.
So you're saying there's 100 times higher death rate with this coronavirus than with influenza?
Compared to influenza.
100 times.
That's, I believe, the number. And I believe the number was 0.01 that they were saying.
Wow, I thought it was 0.1. Anyway,
and even if it's 0.1,
that's 10 times more.
It's 10 times more. So
yeah,
it's still
10 times.
It's still significant.
Less than
100
times.
Let me get to why it's more significant. One person with influenza will infect 1.3 people with influenza. And if you round that to 1-to-1, just for the sake of the argument, and add a little bit more on later on, you're basically doubling each time someone. So one person infects one other person. Now 2 people have it, but that one person will now only infect one other person and one other person and one other person along the range, right? And because it's slightly above, so you go 1 to 1. They go along, and in the end, you're not multiplying out. Maybe that one person affects 2 at one point in time, but it's really because of this 1.3. But eventually, after going through like 24 iterations of that, the bottom 3 steps on a chessboard, you get to something like 400 people being infected at the end, right? The COVID-19 has a 1-to-2 or even 1-to-2.5 ratio, right? So the first person infects 2, those 2 people then infect another 2. And so it exponentially grows to the point that by the time you get to the 3rd row, I think it's 1 million people being affected at the end, right? Like at the end.
I've heard measles is 12.
At the end of the first row, it's like 100 and something thousand people are already affected by the end of just the bottom row of a chessboard if you keep multiplying this out. So a death rate of, even if it is only 10-fold higher than influenza will have much less infection based on the people passing it on to each other than what COVID-19 will have. And you also have a hospital system that can only handle a certain number of people.
Mm.
And that's actually probably the biggest issue. We've allowed our healthcare system to become very much a money saving enterprise, where you try to have the minimum amount of stock on hand. You try to have the minimum
Is
amount.
a ventilator expensive? This is the critical point,
Yeah,
isn't it?
these
With
things,
ICU units.
these things are expensive, and
care.
you generally look at a department and go, what is in a regular period of time the most number of ventilators? And I could almost guarantee that there will be days in a year where there won't be enough ventilators, like in the current system. Forget about
Right,
COVID.
before this was here.
Before this was here, there would be
And is it an expensive device? I mean, you're selling devices worth $1 million each, aren't you?
We are, yeah, and I'm sure a ventilator. I don't know the price of a ventilator. We don't sell those things necessarily, but I think that the price of a ventilator might be, I don't know, $20,000, $30,000.
Can't you just grab a scuba tank and shove it down somebody's throat?
No,
What's the big deal about
it doesn't work that way. And then no, definitely, and well, because it's also this transfer. It has to be able to transfer both ways. It's not just oxygen. So respirators and ventilators and how they work and which one, as we said at the start, don't know the whole science of it, but basically these are things that they try to minimize how many they don't purchase one for every person in the hospital.
No.
Because they can't afford to do that, because what if they only need 2 for the entire year, and now they have 10 there just in case 10 people come in? Well, that's a lot of money sitting there wasting, and there's service costs and there's upkeep and uptime. So you want to try to keep as minimum as possible to try to save as much money as possible, right? This is the way the medical industry works. According to the statistics that I thought I'd quickly look up. So this is according to the New York Times. Mm-hmm. Whether we want to believe everything that's written or not, but let's just use this as a baseline. They say death rate of seasonal flu in the US, and this is important because you have to look at the world rate versus the US rate. Healthcare systems are different around the world. The death rate from the seasonal flu is 0.1% in the US. So that was the number you were talking about there. All right, so that's 0.1%. Then they say that currently it's unclear, but in mainland China, it was at 2.3%.
Death rate,
2.3% for COVID-19. Above 80, it's 14.8%. But that's just an overall death rate in that area of around 2.3%. So you're talking tenfold to 1%, and then you're talking about from 1% to 2% being another doubling of that, right? So 20 times higher.
By country, in terms of who's winning in the stats. Want to place a bet? Who wins? No.
Wow, I'm almost certain that America will end up winning the overall
But
thing.
we're getting scores from America that are way higher than China, which doesn't seem to make honest sense to me. I mean, I'm wondering if China's fudged the numbers a little bit with their reporting. Do you think so? Or do you think it's flattened out?
You know the difference between China and America and actually a lot of the rest of the world? So having spent a fair bit of time working with China when I was in sales a few years ago, like I'm not saying that their numbers are always going to be perfect, because there's a large volume that they have to work their numbers based on. There will be things that fall through the cracks. The difference is, though, they have a governmental system that basically can roll out mass communication to massive parts of the population who are generally subservient to government request. So the ability for China to have shut down Wuhan, an entire city of 30 million people, bigger than Australia, within like a very short period of time of finding the first case, not of having it reach to a level of pandemic, finding the first case and finding that it was starting to spread and shutting a whole city down, will have had a massive effect. So whether you are a conspiracy theorist on the side of China's made this as biological weapon, as we said, don't really believe it. If you're a conspiracy theorist on the side of China, it was much worse, but they're not releasing the numbers to the rest of the world, I just don't think so. I really believe that it actually is, at the end of the day, their numbers are probably not perfect, for sure, but I believe that they have a much better system. And you look at the way India deals with it as well. I think that these countries with so many people have to have some level of subservience to the government's request to be able to even function with that many people. And so therefore, I think that they're probably more capable. I mean, think about it. India has more homeless people than Australia has people.
Yeah.
Right. And Australia has a very conservative government and very much tries to hide their own numbers of how many homeless people are in Australia, and tries to help, and everyone tries to help homeless people as often as possible, generally. But you've got countries in the world that have more homeless people than our entire country has people. So actually probably have more homeless people than Germany has people.
I can't even find India on this list.
So
is India a latecomer in
Yes.
in this race?
They are.
How do they get the virus so late? That's weird. So I'm not sure if this is
part of me wanted to say, who wants to travel to India in winter?
Isn't it always kind of seasonally nice? It was like monsoon season kind of thing instead of winter. I don't know.
It's not the time to travel. Like, I talked to an Indian colleague today. I had a phone call with actually an Indian colleague and a Chinese colleague. So that was actually quite interesting. So the Indian colleague basically said, "Yep, they've shut us down 3 weeks. No one's allowed out of the house." And then he said, because of where India sits in relation to the IT industry, with most of the rest of the world, India has one of the best IT systems in the country, like in the world, within their country. And so he's gone, the fact that we're part of the IT group and we're doing that, they're not as shut down. A lot of them have been working from home anyway within their environment. So this is like they're set up from an internet point of view, ready to go for home office work. I don't know how it is with Australia and the national broadband network. Does it work at all?
I don't have NBN yet. We don't have NBN on my property. I think a few of my friends have it.
Yeah,
I've got ADSL, but I've moved to 4G, so I've got a little dongle thing, which is much faster than ADSL. So here are the rates of infection so far in the world. So we've got in the world, the whole world. This doesn't sound right anymore. Oh no, it's because I clicked on America and I clicked away from the whole world. I don't know how to get back.
Although you almost got numbers that looked high enough for the whole world normally, right?
Well, no, I watched a documentary on the 1918 Spanish flu, which was broadcast on their newspapers while everyone else was talking about World War I, the Great War. Mm-hmm. So Spain became the generator of that sort of news. So it didn't originate in Spain. It probably originated in, I don't know, China, at another wet market. I don't know. Probably from slicing animals open. There are 638,146 cases. What's the date today? 29th of March, 2020?
30th.
So that's where we stand at the moment in this point in history. There have been 30,039 confirmed deaths. 202 countries or territories with cases. But they never tell you how many countries or territories there are in the world. I'm guessing about 255.
Yeah.
America, number one, 103,000. Italy, 92,000. China, 82,000. Spain, 72,000. Germany, 52,000. So you're coming 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th.
Yep.
So are you seeing some of these? I want to click on Germany for a second to see how many deaths you got. 389.
Okay, but so this then comes down to a little bit of an interesting scenario. We're doing an entire episode on coronavirus, so this is it's an interesting scenario, right? So firstly, you have testing. So the question to all of those countries to normalize data would be how easy do people have access to testing? So if you take America's number of 100,000 people, but their testing is apparently very poor, right? So they've got 360 million people or something like that in the US, some high 300s million
325, I think.
people, whatever,
Yeah.
and they have, I mean, yeah, give or take 40 million.
Yeah.
But they have 100,000 people, and they themselves say that their testing capabilities are terrible. So, what is the number that have it? What are the number that can infest someone else? Infest is not the right word. Infect someone else.
People are contagious. Yeah.
Who are contagious? Who could give it to someone else as they're going? Because that is a number that's quite important. See, Germany went the other way. They went to testing as many people as they possibly could within the realms of what they were able to test, which means that they were able to see a lot more people with it and tell a lot more people to stay at home and quarantine themselves earlier that weren't necessarily. So within that reason, you could argue that the curve starts to flatten by doing more early testing to keep people away from each other. But they still saw a raise to the point that they felt that isolation of the whole population was a better method overall to keep that curve flat. So testing, I mean, so if you look at the death rate in Germany comparative to other countries, it's quite low. So they're most likely then, one of the arguments there is most likely testing people who are not acute. They're not likely to develop into an acute case, right? So that's one element of it. And the other element is trying to say, well, the death rate's a bit lower because the German healthcare system is designed for such situations. And that, from my experience going to German hospitals, is not true. So
can I ask, is there anyone you know personally or somebody you know personally who knows somebody personally who has it or has had it?
Yeah, so one of my best mates has the virus, yeah. So he went skiing at one point in time before they sort of started suggesting people should be staying at home, and went to Austria to go skiing, and then was there with a couple of doctors and skiing for a bit, and then they came back and the doctor said that they think that they have it, so they tested and told him to go and get tested. So he tested earlier, and as he said himself, he has had some symptoms, a little bit of fever, a little bit of coughing, and like a little bit, but not much. And he said if no one in the world knew corona existed, he would have just assumed he had the flu. Would have been his way. He probably would have been back at work having a little bit of a cough occasionally during that process, right?
Yeah.
So that was a really interesting thing. There's probably, and Australia is a bit different because you're in summer. Here it's winter, so people here are getting seasonal flu.
I've got the flu at the moment.
Generally, right? But it's less likely to happen at the summer months. It's something that comes through the change of season, right? Generally. So there is this theory that Australia should get onto it as quickly as possible, because in winter it's going to be more likely to not be obvious between people, and you could keep. And also the thing is that hospital systems, it would be rather interesting to look at the statistics on it, but the from my experience in the hospital, anecdotally, is that we had more people in hospitals during winter than we did during summer. Anecdotally, I'm not sure of what the exact numbers are of.
I'm never quite understanding how these diseases proliferate in cold weather more. Like, you go out in the rain sometimes and you'll catch your death, right? What the fuck's that all about? You're going to go outside, get a bit of rain on you. I have a shower every day. What the hell is the difference between getting rained on?
Yeah, well, okay.
Are there viruses in raindrops? What's going on with that?
No, but there's viruses in nature. So do you know that rain smell? The smell when and that's a really nice smell. I love that smell, right? But that smell is bacteria. So basically, the raindrops hit the dirt, hit the dust and everything that has settled, and then it releases these
puffs up
aerosol versions of things, and it puffs up. It's a nice smell. I love the smell.
Wow.
But actually, that's
the first answer I've ever heard that sounds like a proper answer. I've never heard a proper answer for that. Yeah. It's like me finding out now why the sky's blue, right? It's like, it's just amazing. Thank you. That makes perfect sense.
And so that could be one reason, that there is more of an aerosol-based version of other bacterias and things that you can breathe in at that point in time. The other part is that during winter, your body needs to remain at a certain temperature, right? The human body wants to sit in a certain temperature, somewhere between like 36 and 38 degrees, or in that nice little key area where it tries to stay there. And for the body to stay there, it needs to burn energy to remain hot during cold months, and during hot months it sort of can cool itself down a little bit more.
So if you want to lose weight, keep traveling to where it's snowing.
No, well, no, well, not necessarily that way, but yeah, theoretically, if you're always in cold weather, I mean, there is something to be said for that. I think your body will adapt and get itself used to something, so it's more going from hot to cold to hot to cold. The reason why I think more people get colds during winter, more chest sort of things during winter, is there's more of this bacteria around, and more the thing. It sort of generally things survive longer in a cold, not a freezing in cold, but in a colder environment than in a hotter environment.
Because UV and sunlight can kill some things, can't they?
Yeah, there's other elements that can kill off things, and the other thing is that people are exerting effort and energy to stay there. The other
body
question is
temperature
also then related to cycles, and like how much sunlight, do you get enough vitamin D? How does your immune system deal with not having as much sunlight in winter as it does in summer? Therefore, your body generally has to deal with other elements to keep itself in a perfect homeostasis, and that's this area.
But the devagification of that spiel was that bacteria sitting on the ground, alive, it gets smashed, it pops up, goes up your nostrils, it's all wet, you sniff it down into your throat, it lands in there, goes into your lungs and causes mucus and fever and all this other shit.
The only
immune system fights it.
The only element there is that this happens in summer as well as winter. Like the same bacteria sit on the ground. It's just the question is.
There's also pollen and stuff with people who've got allergies and.
So there's plenty of elements to why people. I think there's.
I don't want plenty. I want three.
Well, the problem is that there's so many things. But if you want to go to the three elements that I believe that are the biggest causes of it, is vitamin D deficiency, of people spending more time inside buildings. And Australia has a much higher vitamin D per person than the rest of the world. And a lot of people in Europe get prescribed vitamin D. I get prescribed vitamin D here in Germany. I never needed it in Australia, but I get prescribed it here because my vitamin D level had dropped significantly because
it snows where you live at the moment, doesn't it, in winter?
Well, it hasn't snowed much this year. Very little amount of snow. Actually, coming full circle back to a conversation you started off the conversation about how the bushfires were there and all of a sudden they're gone, right?
Yeah.
Greta Thunberg did her whole world tour of on a boat to relation to global warming and all this, and then all of a sudden people are like, yeah, who cares? People are dying anyway. Like there's a little bit of this whole like. I saw a very funny meme the other day of basically saying, like, when Greta Thunberg was talking about scientists talking about climate change, half the people on the planet are like, whatever, that's fake news. Don't agree with it. That's not true. And then all of a sudden, people start dying around the world from coronavirus, and all of a sudden, people are going, scientists are telling us to stay indoors. Like, people are like, they're the same scientists.
It's weird that Greta Thunberg. She was born way after I started worrying about climate change. She's only 17. I was scared about it during that the same time that "We Are the World, We Are the Children" campaign was happening. What's that? USA for Africa.
20 years ago, I think.
No, more than that.
No, it's 20.
80s, wasn't it?
20 or 30 year anniversary. I saw a video the other day.
Probably more like 30.
Okay, you might be right. I was just like
Sting at around the same time was
35 years ago. 35 years
exactly.
ago.
It's a long time ago.
A flash mob for the "We Are the World" 30th year anniversary that was uploaded 5 years ago. So there you go. No, but It's amazing.
No, but Sting was going to, it must have been Brazil or something, and talking to these guys with these lip plates.
Yeah.
I've never seen such a thing. So he's going to the Amazon and talking about climate change and deforestation and stuff. I was crying and I was going to shave my head and all this sort of stuff to try and protest against this terrible thing that was happening, too much pollution and stuff. And people just said, no, the wind will blow that smoke away. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, and literally when
And
the
now
Amazon
taking this
was,
little kid.
when the Amazon was on fire 30 years later, people were like, "Oh shit! Actually, the wind is literally blowing the smoke away." No, look, I mean, at the end of the day, she wasn't saying anything new. She was just saying it in a different forum and that's fine. I'm happy with people taking their forum. I think there's a lot more. I mean, we've talked about this in the past. You have things that you're very passionate about that I don't specifically. I'm not specifically passionate about it. Although since we last talked on the radio, because I think your dislike of animal cruelty and eating animals in general, or going in that direction, is something that I personally still like the taste of meat, and I still eat meat.
Tastes good.
But one of the things that I've definitely done since in the last 5-6 years is started to at least care about where I'm buying my meat. That's probably the biggest point. And it sort of is a very similar. So I have two different directions on this one that I'll now I've answered a lot of your questions. I'll give you this sort of thing. So I believe that the biggest problem with the meat industry. So I like meat and I'm not going to stop eating it because I like it. I also am a believer that the only reason we're able to have this debate and have this conversation in the forums that we're having with the intelligence that humans have at this point in time to talk.
Because our brains evolved because we ate meat. It's
because our brains evolved because we ate meat in the past, and especially because we ate cooked meat in the past to get to that point. So I, in a way, believe that it's a very top 10 percentile thing to really try to turn around and say you don't need meat, because it is a cheap source of protein for a large version of the population. Maybe it's not 10%, maybe it's 30%.
Is it cheaper?
What I believe is the top 10% can afford to maybe see where they eat meat. That's one argumentation where people can go, well, hey, yes, eat meat, but don't eat cruel meat. That could be one direction you could go in and say this concept of farm to table. And this is, for me, the second side, and that's the bit
farm to fork. Sounds good.
Farm to fork. And I'm actually quite passionate about that at the moment, that I go into a shopping center and I see a fridge full of meat. And they purchase that meat not knowing who's going to buy the meat. Right? So the animal has died and may get thrown away. Which in my mind is more, I mean, yes, there is practices where people might be cruel to animals. And I know there's plenty of videos. You could find enough videos online showing people being cruel, and you could say that equals the rest of the farming industry. I don't believe that is true. I believe it's the minority in terms of the cruelty act, and I deplore this side of things. To me, I agree with you. That's cruel, and people should be put in prison. And
yeah, I think most people agree with that side of it.
That's not so. And if that was 80% of the meat industry that were doing that, then I would eat significantly less meat, because I wouldn't want to be actively adding into that. I believe it's probably your lower 5% that are doing that, and the rest are actually following practices and being audited within their practices. And the expectation on a government is that they should be getting rid of those practices. What I think is more cruel is giving up the life to be eaten, but never actually being eaten. That would be the bit where I go, wasteful. We're just wasting a lot of it. And that's where I say people should be a little bit more aware of when they want to eat and when they want to eat meat. So if I was able with an app to contact my local supermarket saying on Wednesday I'm going to come and pick up a bunch of meat, and there are butchers around here, not bakeries, they're not going to help me with my meat, but the butchers around here close.
The candlestick maker might put in a good
exactly.
word for you.
Might be able to help me out, or at least with the fire to cook it. No, I basically, if they were open instead of opening at like normal business hours where everyone's at work, they were open in a period of time that people could order meat in a week in advance and say, next week I want this, I want 2 chickens and a cow. Like, then you would be planning what you're wanting to eat and plan. And I think the biggest problem with the meat industry, actually all farming industries, to be honest, because all farming industries have waste.
Animal farming?
Well, all animal farming, but actually all farming, because all farming uses methods that will kill other creatures within the process of doing it. I mean, they all do this. I think we've become so used to pay to eat whenever you want that expands out the amount of waste that happens in society. And I would wonder whether or not we could become a more efficient society, pricing would be better, etc., if we were able to just turn around and say, and this is the problem, farmers would then have to sort of be keeping more track of stock. And so instead of the shops keeping track of stock, the farming community would have to keep track of stock. They would need to know, because they would need to be able to work out.
It seems similar. It seems not. It wouldn't make any difference.
Yeah, no, it's not, because what you could do is you can go, well, I know I will kill 10 cows a month to provide the amount of stock that the shops are asking me to provide every month, right? So you in advance know what you need to do. So you are then in the farming.
But that's what I'm thinking. The shops have certain shelf space. They're not going to order more than they can fit.
Yeah, but the shelf space will be always more than what they believe people want to order. So it's the people who just walk in randomly and buy.
I see. Things expire on the shelf and they throw it out.
On the shelf and they throw it out. If they were working in a principle that they're always understocked, and people go into the shop and go, "Oh, I really did want some chicken, but there's none there," then that would be different. Then if they minimize their throwing out. But because they're providing a service, people want to go in there. And if they keep going into a shop and they don't have chicken every time they go in the shop, they'll go to a shop.
Well, that's more and more people order online, which I think a lot of people are doing, especially in this crisis. Except for you. You walk down the street and go, coronavirus, yum, 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 right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
I've been ordering online. I've got a delivery coming at 5 a.m. tomorrow. I don't intend... I've got some ice cream in there because I'm not vegan. I'm a bit hypocritical that way. I have milk and ice cream and stuff. Anyway, I'm going to let it sit there for at least 5 hours before I pick it up.
Don't disappoint yourself, man.
And I'm going to chocolate, though, you know.
Yeah, but the ice cream, by the way...
But the vegan desserts taste awesome as well, so
the
I
ice
just have that
cream,
more readily available.
I'm assuming the ice cream is in the plastic, inside.
No, I'm not saying I'm worried about touching the interior of product packaging. I'm worried about all the different people along the process over the last 24 hours who will have just touched the bags and everything, right?
But
I'll wash my hands. I'll just unpack it and wash my hands. But anyway, they're delivering at 5 a.m. or whatever.
You open the lid of the ice cream, right? Wash your hands, ice cream, put it back on, wash your hands. I mean...
No. I'm actually considering... No, but now that you've mentioned this, I am considering rinsing every packet, not cardboard probably, because it'll get all wet, but fucking plastic containers.
It's only metal.
Am I being paranoid?
Yes.
Everything that I'm going to be picking up off that doorstep has been out in the coronavirus world.
No, don't go that way.
It's coming to get me.
That's crazy. So basically, if you're going to put your hand to your mouth,
or scratch my nose
after touching the thing, but the thing itself, I mean, unless you're constantly touching these packages, then no. I think what was the latest advice? There's a really good YouTube video. Trevor Noah talked to the head of one of the doctors in the US, Felke, or I think is his name or whatever, and he basically talked about where it stays, how long it stays. So metal and hard plastic, like not soft plastic, but properly hard plastic surfaces, yes, it can stay on there for an extended period of time. But again, in that situation, just if you're going to touch this hard plastic that you believe is being constantly touched by other people. But I've got some hard plastic in my kitchen. It's in my house. It's in my environment, right?
But if it's been in the store less than 24 hours ago, wouldn't you want to wash your hands after touching it? Because
no.
probably you picked it off the shelf yourself, right? But my stuff's going to be coming straight from some.
So this is again you're
putting it on the truck drivers, bagging, and what I don't know.
So again,
delivery man.
For anyone who's really worried about helping society with coronavirus and stuff, this is again exactly why you're being told to stay inside. You get that package and go in. The chances that it has coronavirus on it are very, very low. Very, very low percentage that it's going to be on there from a person who had coronavirus, active coronavirus, who didn't know that they had active coronavirus, touching it and giving it to you. But if you stay inside your house and you do get it, you can't give it to anyone else. So maybe
if I stay home.
So you said you have the flu right now. Maybe you actually have coronavirus, but you just don't know that it's a level of coronavirus it is. You're staying inside.
Actually, no, I'm pretty sure I don't, because my mum's a medical worker. She's a nurse. Here's another question I'm going to ask you about. She's 71. Well, she's 70.
Yeah.
She got tested because she's a nurse. And she's got to go back. But she was thinking about retiring this year.
Yeah.
Retire fucking now. Don't go back.
No.
She had pneumonia 6 months ago. Pneumonia. Yeah, so whatever disease she had, she caught from my nieces, little kids. And so I got that from them too. So if she only had the flu, then that's all I've got. There's no reason for me to think that I've got coronavirus. I've had all the symptoms that people describe coronavirus to be.
No, but what I'm saying, so my mate who's been tested positive with it basically said that he felt like he probably just had the flu. So the fact that you think you've just got the flu,
my mum got tested and she probably had the same thing as I've got.
And you're not going to get tested for the flu either, right? So
no.
So don't bother getting tested for coronavirus. Just stay inside for 14 days so that you stay away from the rest of the population.
You say that so easy. Right? Just rolls off the tongue. 14 days.
Dude, I've been home for 14 days.
Have you? No, you just went shopping this morning, didn't you?
Yeah, but I've been in lockdown for 14 days. I've been away from work. Yeah, well, that's the German version of it, and you're going to have the same version of it.
I know. It's good that we can still leave the fucking house. I've heard that in China they're welding people's doors shut. I don't know if that's true.
Yeah, and China had drones flying above telling people to go home, right? So this is what we're saying. Why is their number so much lower? Well, they actually had drones flying around the streets yelling at people to get back inside. It's going to kill you, like a zombie apocalypse, and they listen to their people. Australians are like, this is like the zombie apocalypse, and most of the people are going, oh, great, I played like Resident Evil and I know how to deal with this.
Yeah, stocking up, getting the weapons ready. 10 points.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's
you know who doesn't have coronavirus? North Korea.
Well, yeah, exactly.
It goes zero each day. It goes 0, 1, 0, 1, 0. I reckon just kill off anyone who's got it. He's got it. Somebody sneezes.
They just keep sending them across the border to South Korea all the time. Just going, hey, go in there.
Was their rate pretty high at one point, South Korea? Or they had a very meticulous screening method at one point, didn't they? They're a pretty technological country. They've got the fastest internet in the world.
South Korea is one of the first ones to have it because there's a lot of travel between China and South Korea.
Okay.
But yeah, look, it's an amazing time. So talking of amazing time, because I do have to get back to work.
Oh, this is your lunch break. Thank you so much for your time.
After lunch break. It's been a good, not fully.
Cushion.
You need a disclaimer somewhere saying neither Paul or Mark.
Medical professional. I'll scroll it underneath here.
Neither Paul or Mark. Please listen to your authorities and do your own research. I had a next time we get a chance to chat, because I'm enjoying this. It's actually quite fun. The next time we get a chance to chat, we need to talk about mindfulness and stress. I need to talk to you about mindfulness. So since we last talked, I have completely changed in a lot of things in relation to mindfulness, stress, and dealing with all those things. It might be interesting for you.
Cool, Sam Harris. Thank you very much for joining us. Do you listen to Sam Harris?
Actually, I've got a couple more minutes. Let's say there, just quickly. Do you identify with being politically? Do you identify with being sort of left or right, or do you sort of just have political opinion?
Sometimes I think things need to be enforced, and I don't really understand what those things mean. I feel like left means more free to do what you want without too much government interaction to stop you from doing what you need to do. So that's more like cure, and right wing is more like preventative. You're not allowed to do things, so problems can't occur in the first place. Is that correct?
Oh,
So left is cure, right is prevention.
no. So that, well, actually, it's almost there. Yeah. So far left would be saying you're not allowed to say that, you're not allowed to think that, you're not allowed to do that. Everyone is equal. Everyone is the same, right? That's the leftist theoretical approach. This is you must call everyone by their correct pronoun. You must do like, and
yeah.
And you're right. A governmental enforcement of such ideals would be far left to say.
That sounds preventative. Yeah.
Freedom of speech only goes so far, and when it gets to this point, you're no longer allowed to have freedom of speech.
You're not woke enough. Yeah.
And then on the other side is on the far right side of things, you could argue that the people determine which people have which rights. On the far right, so
But the far right, you would say Nazis are right wing, right?
Yeah, so they have.
Well, it sounds very similar to extreme left.
This is the thing. So socialism, like far right far left socialism, versus far right communism.
Restrictions of freedom on both sides.
Restriction of freedom on both sides. So the far left and far right, theoretically, on that. I have an opinion on this. Think about it over the next little bit, and we'll see if we can get the chance to sit and chat again. I don't believe that with the internet, far left and far right should be our governmental thing. So we're sitting in a linear understanding of government, right? And in Australia at the moment, the way I see it, and I've not been there for 10 years, so I'm only going on conversation with Australians and reading newspapers, etc. Both governments in Australia are very much central left, central right. And they're just fighting over the most menial thing. And sometimes you don't even know what their stance is, left or right anyway, right? And so people get up in arms about which government just got elected. And then 6 years later, we'll be up in arms that government seems to have gone a different direction because they never knew where they were in the first place. I really believe that you have left and right, but you have now this center part is actually its own spot. It's a triangle, not a.
Okay.
It's no longer to be a centralist, to have both left and right wing ideas in itself should be a balance that people are looking for. But now you have centralist and where they fit in this triangle overall, like someone who sits right in the middle, basically going, I've got no opinion in any direction whatsoever.
Fence sitter. Yeah.
Yeah, well, not even a fence sitter. Like, an active fence sitter will say there are good ideas on both sides and people need to come together to bring their knowledge and ideas together. Whereas the person who sits in the middle of this triangle have far left and far right viewpoints, but also like they're so they will try to pander to everyone, but never actually get anything done. Can
you give me a brief description of left, right, and center then?
So I would say, and so center is not a good word. So you would say, so if the triangle, you'd say, you can't do left and right anymore, right?
Liberal and conservative.
So you would have
other words for left and right,
full socialism, full communism, and then.
Sorry, isn't socialism and communism grouped together in the left?
No.
And one's fascism, but right is fascism.
Well, you're going to so. Oh well, hang on a sec. So you got socialism, communism, fascism. They're all versions of far opinions. But my understanding is socialism is far left, communism is far right.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought communism and socialism were related.
they are in the fact that they're far left and far right. Now I'm saying, no, this is why we have these conversations.
I'm not sure of them. I haven't got a proper memory of this, but I thought like the father of, I don't know. There's Marx came first, then there was Lenin, right? One of them was like Marx was like socialist, and then Lenin brought in even heavier with communism or something. I don't know the difference between socialism and communism. Communism might be simply that nobody gets more pay than anyone else. Socialism is more about a general vague sharing of commodities. Whereas fascism is basically a dictatorship.
So you got so here we go. Oh my god, I think
it all stems from the French Revolution, right? The Girondists and the Jacobins.
Mm-hmm. The Jacob, yeah.
Can't remember what the. I think
Okay, so
Robespierre and Danton were.
So far right is nationalism.
Sounds like patriotism to me. I don't understand what that means. Nationalism.
So extreme nationalism, nativist ideologies, and authoritarian tendencies.
That doesn't sound all related. One sounds like keep things the way they are.
Far right. Okay, hang on a sec. So far, you might be right. So this is at least according to Wikipedia, not the most useful source always.
I like Wikipedia.
Describe historical experiences of fascism. It today includes neo-fascism, neo-Nazism, third position, alt-right, white nationalism, and other ideologies or organizations that feature ultra-nationalistic, chauvinist,
every single explanation requires more explanation.
Theocratic, racist, homophobic, anti-communist. So anti-communist.
Now that's just insults for something. I don't want to hear that shit. I want to hear just like.
I'm saying, man. This is what I'm saying. Yeah, that we need to get this down.
I know. So, everything is so much simpler than people make it.
So I hate vagueness. Left wing is attributed to fascism.
Huh?
So that's weird. Oh.
Yeah.
See, oh god. Oh, look, mate.
Because if you want to share everything, right? That's socialist and communist sort of ideals. That's kind of the left side, as far as I understand, of the. I can't remember how it worked in French Revolution.
Here's a nice sort of thing. So on the far left, you have communism.
Okay.
On the far right, you have nationalism.
Don't know what that means.
On the community based on ethics versus community based on morals. That's your difference.
What the fuck? What's the difference between ethics and morals? Yeah, now I'm completely.
So
fuck.
On the left, you would say based on ethics means you would say, is it ethical to place man and woman separate to each other, right? You would have to say both man and women are equal because ethically that would be correct.
But even equal is a vague word in terms of men and women.
On the far right, as long as you're treating people correctly, it doesn't matter whether you believe that they're not equal. Whereas on the other side, on an ethical basis, not a moralistic basis, you could actually ethically believe that man and women are equal, but moralistically treat one worse than the other.
I don't understand this difference between morals and ethics.
I think
like fucking synonyms.
It's this is the reason why I believe nowadays, because I believe what you're basically showing is the fact that the terminology used in terminology used in politics nowadays is incredibly divisive in itself, and is very much.
I think they use the word conservative for right and liberal for left.
They use conservative for right and liberal for left. However, the Liberal government in Australia would be considered to be on the right.
When you're saying centre right.
Centre right, right? This is the thing. So they say the focus of the left is society. The focus of the right is the individual. Individual freedom versus societal freedom. So, however,
so at the moment we're experiencing with the lockdown, right-wing politics being played out. Is that correct?
No, you're not. So this is why I'm saying. Oh, I'm glad that. See, this is the point that I was trying to raise. So using this chart that I have, I'll put a link in the description for you later on. Using this chart that I just grew up, informationisbeautiful.net. It sounds really cool. And basically it says here that the focus of the right is on the individual. The goal is economic freedom. They support the employer and they believe in free trade. That's one sort of just set underlying basis, right? And on the left, they say they focus on society with the goal of personal freedom. They support the worker and they support fair trade on the left, right? Now, the interesting part there is their focus is on the whole society as a whole, looking at the whole society, but aiming for personal freedom. One of the things that Jordan Peterson talks about is the fact that if you place a group of people together into a societal focus, then how can you gain personal freedom? Because you're saying all this type of person is this based on the society. All people must do this based on a society. Well, then everyone loses their personal freedom as part of that. On the other side, they're focusing on everyone has freedom of speech, everyone has freedom of right, but then that means they affect all other people's personal freedom. So they're focused on individuals, but they're not providing a personal freedom because individuals can then be brought down based on the same theory.
We were talking about maths before. Sorry, go on.
But this is interesting because you just said, okay, so the government shutdown is a version of being far right, right? Or more on the right. However, the goal of the right is economic freedom, and by shutting people down, you reduce economic freedom. So you would argue that that doesn't work that way. You argue for free trade. Well, the people who are doing free trade via the internet might be able to be supported in that sort of situation, but they're not really helping employers because they're losing a lot of money because they don't have the full access to people. So it's a really interesting thing that there's another version of government type that needs to exist that far right and far left don't talk about. And that's to me where you have to be able to, and capitalism is not the right. So they say capitalism is a far right or more of a right side of government.
I'm not sure if that comes into it.
Well, it has to. I think they all have to come into it because
economics is that part of that whole ideological division, or is that a separate issue?
What was that? Say that again.
The discussion of economics, whether you want capitalism or just what's the opposite of capitalism?
Socialism.
Is it though? Isn't that a different topic? You talk about money, the way money is made and distributed.
Yeah, you were talking about the way money. They're talking about the way money is distributed, right? So
well, saying this entire conversation is about economics.
Capitalism is about economics.
Yes, that is.
Okay.
That's on the topic of economics.
So on the topic of economics, you have regulated on the left, regulated economy, business and industry. Everything's regulated, tax and spend. Tax and spend is socialism. The social group should get the money. There should be less rich and poor, and everyone should be more in a focus. Whereas the right side is deregulated economy, business and industry. Don't tax and spend. That's basically get your money, but spend your money when you want to spend. So that's more of a capitalist thing. But you might be right. I mean, China is a capitalist communism. So that's difficult to...
Well, I've heard that they've just recently become that way. So it might be just a teething issue there.
Well,
you asked me about my political view. I think capitalism is the best way to do it, so nobody has to quash their dreams to make sure that everybody gets a part of their Facebook or Microsoft billions, right? You can aim for the sky if you want to, just so long as we keep raising the minimum standard of life for the people at the bottom. So that, in the olden days, King Henry VIII, you would prefer to be him having a feather tickling the back of your throat so you could eat more food and vomit it up or whatever, right? While everyone else was starving to death and shit like that. But he had a shitty toilet, His maidens weren't as hot as he wanted them to be. He had to chop off their heads every so often. We've all got it better than King Henry VIII now. Even a homeless bum in the street can go into a movie theater, sneak into a movie theater, or steal some hot chips from the bin. More delicious than King Henry ever ate, right? There's so much better way of life. I'm talking about in Australia.
No,
a
but
homeless person
actually,
in Australia is probably better off than King Henry VIII. You've dropped out.
I tend to agree with you on that base example, for sure. With one exception on it. It's this. I agree, but the social and moral freedom, or social freedom, plays a massive part on humans. So you're right. If you were to just base things on the access to certain things, almost everyone on this planet, or at least in a Western or a first world evolved society, almost everyone has access to things greater than what the 1% had 100 years or 200 years ago, right? There's a large change there. However, as human beings, our self-worth value is based on where you are in relation to everyone, and that's a problem with society. That's a problem with our methodology. It's a problem with our teaching, and it gets into the topic that we'll talk about next time, which
mindfulness,
into this neuroscience of mindfulness and where people are. There are people who are miserable and have a lot, that have hundreds times more things than what Henry VIII had, right? But are they better off as people than he was? If you don't know that you can have better, if you don't know mass communication, travel around the world in a day, all this sort of stuff, if you don't know that exists, you don't know that you're missing out on something that you thought you had. So the people who see that echelon would then say, well, I am judging myself in relation, and that's got a chemical and neurological aspect to it that still affects people nowadays, and definitely worth having a. Mate, I got to go.
Thank you so much for your time.
No problem at all. Thank you for jumping on. I've been missing this, and I've been meaning to have a chat with you for a while. So
enjoy working remotely.
We'll do, sir. Absolutely. And yeah,
till next time.
We'll chat later, mate. Catch ya.
Okay, see you.
Bye.
Bye.